good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to get started. Hoping everyone had a good week and is enjoying some cool weather before we get real hot real soon. As many of you know, my name is Malini Sims, and I'm a principal planner with the town of Oro Valley, and I'll be facilitating tonight's meeting. I am joined tonight by Bayer Vella, our planning manager, and Paul Melcher, the Community and Economic Development Department Director. All of us are here to support you through the discussion this evening. First and foremost, we love to see everybody's faces and hear your voices. So if you're able to, please have your video on so we can kind of get to know one another. If you can't have your video on, that's fine. I also want to let you know, though, that there is the chat function where you can also put your comments tonight. The most important thing is that we hear from all of you. With that said, I'd first like to give everyone an opportunity. If this is your first meeting with this group, if you'd please raise your virtual hand, would love to have you introduce yourself to the group. So is there anyone on tonight that this is your first meeting with this group? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'm going to share a short presentation and then we'll get right into the discussion tonight. Just give me one moment. All right. So tonight's focus is to gather your feedback on the first draft of the amendment criteria, as well as the goals, policies, and actions related to development. Our request is that you help us make sure that they reflect what was heard over the past year, as well as the additional guidance that you provided in your meetings in April. I do want to emphasize the word draft again because, again, this is our first attempt to capture everything, and these drafts will be continue to be refined and will be sent back out to the group for more wordsmithing and review. And again, our aim for this meeting is to achieve consensus on these items. And as a group, you help define the word consensus as something that is headed down the right path, everyone can accept, and is best for the community. I do ask that you keep this in mind as we proceed this evening. Again, our charge is to create a plan that honors what residents voiced over the past year. Now, the guiding principle on the screen, which is shown to the right-hand side, aims to capture the voices that were shared through a statistically projectable survey, online survey, and paper version as well. It's also what we heard while out at over 93 pop-up events and online. It did provide the guidance for our discussion at the beginning of April, as well as our discussion this evening. Now, at the end of this meeting, I will be checking in with this group to make sure it also got it right in terms of capturing resident voices. And then just a quick reminder about the ground rules that everyone accepted. I need everyone's help this evening to make sure we are efficient and productive. We still always have a lot to get through, so I just ask that everyone stay focused on the category or topic we are discussing. We will get through everything this evening. I also just want to ask folks to be respectful of one another as we aim to achieve consensus this evening. And we are going to be using a virtual whiteboard tonight. Just want to remind folks that there is a navigation menu on your lower right-hand corner that you can use to zoom in and pan around the whiteboard. Now, I will be moving this around a bit as we go through the amendment criteria and the goals. So I did put a link to those in the chat. So if you'd prefer to open them up on your own device to follow along, please feel free to do so. Right, so with that, I'm just going to launch our whiteboard. Just one moment. All right, so let me zoom in a little. So again, for tonight, we are going to start off talking about the amendment criteria. We're then going to go through goals, policies, and actions. We're going to related to a central gathering area, mixed-use development and compatibility. We also have electric vehicle charging stations and utilities, and then we'll wrap up with that guiding principle. So I am going to move us over to our amendment criteria. Zoom in a little. So what we heard last time from this group, and this was during the in-person meeting on April 14th and 17th, was the existing criteria overall. Your feedback was that it works well. However, there is opportunity to tighten up and strengthen some of the language. Also wanted to make sure that it was more evident that it's the responsibility of the applicant to show that they meet the criteria. There are also comments to add in review evaluation about historical and cultural resources, as well as the fiscal impacts or financial impacts to the town. Now, one thing we also heard was that making sure that the amendment is necessary or good for the community. And what we gathered from the group is that there needs to be a benefit to the community if you're amending the general plan. So our charge was to shape something that would be measurable. We did hear that from our commissioners who were at that meeting, that it needs to be something that they are able to evaluate in a measurable way. So the way that is written, it ties it to the vision, guiding principles, and goals and policies. And essentially what this means is it would require an applicant to essentially provide a scorecard, if you will, or a full analysis of how their amendment is benefiting the community by meeting the vision, guiding principles, goals, and policies. All the existing criteria is shown in the left-hand side of the table, and on the right hand is the new criteria. Specifically, the new language is in red. So I want to give everyone a moment to read through this. And again, if you're having trouble seeing it, if you click on the link in the chat, you will also be able to open it up. And then when you're ready, if you want to raise your hand, if you have a comment, question, area for clarification, or if there's something that you think was missed. Cheryl?
On 2C, I think maybe we would want to change reduce back to impact, because if you say reduce, they can't do anything that would reduce police, would reduce fire, would reduce parks. It just, now reduce water would be good, but I think the others are more of an impact if, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, fair point.
Oh, and I had one other thing I wanted to mention. Let's see here, what number is that?
Cheryl, if I could
Yes.
ask you a quick question before you move on from that.
Sure.
If the language changed to something that the amendment shall not significantly impact the community in the following ways, result in a reduction in public services, does that keep the continuity or does that change it too much?
I think that does it. I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, and I can't see where I have this in here, but it talks about, I guess it's probably number 3, long-term. No, it isn't. It said something about commercial, that the community, it has to positively affect commercial. And I wrote a note to myself saying, well, don't we want the residential developments to contribute positively to the long-term economic stability as well?
And that's number 5. So you're right. Right now it is that all non-residential amendments have to show that they are contributing positive long-term economic stability of the town.
Yeah, so I think it should also say residential, because we don't want to have developments that just simply cost the town, right?
So right now, though, it does relate it to economic development. I'm wondering, and this is a question, Cheryl, is if, so three definitely gets to the cost to the town, and that's regardless of if it's non-residential or residential. That's all amendments. Where five tries to take that a step further, um, to make sure non-residential are in line with the economic development goals, policies, and actions.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, one more thing. Under item 3,
Mhm.
when you're saying infrastructure, does that include like traffic, or is that strictly roads? And then also noise and of course water, I guess water's, I don't know, is water or any of those part of that, or is that strictly covered up in the previous number C, 2C?
So water is definitely included in 2C. Um,
Noise and traffic.
and then infrastructure would be roads. And then in terms of noise, that could be part of A, as it's changing the character of the area or altering without appropriate buffers and other mitigation.
Would we want to specify at all so that when people complain about the traffic, it's at least mentioned?
Okay.
Because we know we had a lot of complaints about traffic, particularly on Oracle Road and a few of the other major corridors. So and that's my comments on this page.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Michael?
First, wanted to say thank you for the changes. I think it's a step in the right direction. I didn't want to sort of bring up a point. It's sort of a question slash point. So before I was involved in this general plan, one of the assumptions I had made was that one of the purposes of the general plan was to get the community together to sort of talk about the future and what the community needs, so that we're not making changes through all of these small amendments that are done individually. Because typically what you'll do is you'll have a zoning change that might need a general plan amendment, and then you get a impacted community together to talk about it. But this would be the opportunity that you get everyone together to sort of say, okay, the town needs this kind of space, and the general plan doesn't currently have it. And I'm not sure if I've seen that yet. Maybe that's still coming. But I had that assumption that way, if we needed more commercial or we needed more high density residential, it wasn't done as a single small zoning thing without consideration of everything else the town needs to consider for the next 10 years. It's taking all of that into account. And to me, that sounds like a better time to make those kind of changes so that when we do change the general plan, the land use, we're doing it holistically and we're thinking about the town's needs over the next 10 years. And that's why I really like the old general plan amendment evaluation criteria, because it had in that the proposed change is necessary because conditions in the communities had changed to the extent that the plan requires amendment modification. So it's basically saying that, hey, we did a general plan, we thought this was the right thing, but something changed. And that was one of the criteria we wanted added to this, is that the change is necessary, with the idea that if it's not necessary, then let's wait until the next general plan, because the general plan was considering everything. And I don't really see that necessary aspect in this proposal.
Yeah, so a couple things to help maybe with that to respond or to give some more context is so keep in mind with the general plan, you're going to have all the goals, policies, and actions. And that's where I think, Michael, you will see when, especially when you see all of them together, you will see where the values and priorities of residents, they're captured in those. So not everything's going to be captured in the land use map. Some of it's captured of, for instance, wanting the mixed use, wanting where high density should apartments should go. Those are all captured more in the goals, policies, and actions. Now, with regard to changing the land use map, just as a reminder, we do anticipate changes, and this group, we as a group could have made all those changes now, but the decision was to wait because nearby residents should be involved in those changes, right? So there could be changes, and it might be parcel by parcel, but the criteria here is showing that maybe that they're the necessary part is that part of it is that it's benefiting the community by meeting those resident priorities captured in the goals, policies, and actions for mixed use, for more things to do, making sure environment is conserved, resources are conserved. So they still have that's what number one aims to do is make an applicant to go through all those goals and policies and show, hey, we are meeting these. A scorecard and analysis, if you will. So there's not that subjectivity of what changed or if it's necessary or good. We're making sure we're still upholding all the resident values. So this could have been a time, you're right, where all those land use map changes could have been made now. But I think as a group, you guys decided to hold off on most of them and just make those housekeeping ones. So does that help provide some?
And yeah, like I think you're acknowledging what I'm saying.
Okay.
Um, although I do want to add one point is that at least if the policies and goals end up the way they were in the previous plan, they're conflicting. They're going to be conflicting, and that almost anything you want to propose will support the goals policies because they're trying to cover all different aspects. So it's like, yes, we want to stay a small town, family friendly community, but we want to have targeted growth. We want this, we want that. Like it's not clear and prioritized. And so almost anything can meet those criteria. And we got to see that with the Vistoso property in that we said it wasn't meeting the criteria. And of course the previous owner had said, yes, it is for these reasons. And I couldn't deny that they were picking out stuff that met it. And I was hoping we weren't going to do that this time. Haven't seen the final, so it might be the case. But that wasn't. Then the second point I wanted to make is that wasn't the reason I was putting some skepticism to some of the changes that wanted to be made in the general plan. It wasn't because I didn't think the town didn't need it. It was just sort of it was like an either or. It's like we can say yes, we want to put it in the plan for everyone to vote on, or we want to go through the general plan amendment. And there were some of them that I just didn't feel comfortable saying we would go ahead and suggest that without doing the general plan amendment process. And we hadn't really had that discussion of sort of what is it that the town needs and where are we going to put that? And if there was something in those proposals that the town needed, I sort of missed that, or I heard the debate and it sounded like we were just like, oh, we'll leave that for the general plan amendment versus having that tough discussion. And I know it's a tough discussion, and that's why I'm assuming it won't be much different than what we have here. It's just, I would prefer to see those kind of decisions if we're changing something from commercial to residential or from medium residential to high density residential. We're doing it because it's necessary, and we do it looking at it holistically. And if that's what we just did, I think what we basically said is not, hey, let's not do everything, let's leave everything to the amendment. I think what we were saying is we didn't see any necessary changes. And so I don't know how they would do that in the amendment process, because we took a look at it and we said that it isn't necessary. And if they do want to make an amendment, I think the necessary needs to be there in addition to just it's good and it meets the principles, unless we make the principles a lot tighter and prioritize them.
So I would just maybe put out to the group, if you want to push that's necessary, I would advise, and maybe some of the commissioners want to chime into, is making it less subjective. I think that is part of that could be so subjective of if it's necessary, where it's what I heard last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it needs to be something that, especially those who are making the decisions, can get enough information to evaluate if it's necessary. If that, so that's where we are trying to add that kind of analysis or tie it to that a measurable thing. And there's still, it still definitely is a discretionary ask. It's still the Planning and Zoning Commission, council will still have to evaluate and to if they agree or not with that analysis, most definitely. But that was the aim with the wording of number 1. And I want to remind folks is legally we do have to have a process to amend the plan. So the plan will change in the next 10 years. It's inevitable. I'm not going to say it's going to be a lot of changes, but there will be a general plan amendment in 10 years. Just even thinking of what can happen in 10 years in terms of, I don't know, new housing, who knows, right? We don't have a crystal ball. So we have to have an amendment process, and I would expect an amendment. I don't know if it'd be passed, but I don't think that we can. I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I told you this is a plan that exactly as it is will be here in 10 years.
Right. And that
Somebody
is
can
not
improve.
that is not my intention at all to say that we want to make this so that you can't make change. I also like the idea of making it more specific.
Sure.
I don't have a recommendation other than the old one had. It's necessary because change to the requires amendment. I like that. It does set a bar. When we made this plan 10 years ago, made isn't true anymore. And so we have to consider this, and Midtown Council has to approve it. But something happened that it could be we missed
Mike,
something.
sorry, you're cutting out a lot. I don't know if you're moving around, but we may have to come back to you in a moment. We can't hear you very well. Oh, we may have lost him. Okay, we're gonna go to Gail, then Hal, and then Elizabeth.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up where Cheryl left off, and that was on item 2C. Just a little bit of wordsmithing potential rather than say reduce. And I know that someone also recommended some alternate language. I'm going to propose the language under 2C to say adversely impacts public services, police, fire, park, blah, 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 blah. Because it's not really reducing anything. It's only if it's a negative impact. Just a suggestion. Cheryl, does that address what your concern was? Cheryl?
Oh, and you're muted, Cheryl.
Yes, that does. And so did the previous suggestion. Either one of those is better.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then next was Hal, then Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines, I agree that a change to 2C would be appropriate to change it from reduce to impact, and I also agree adversely would be better, adversely impact. But since we're using the word impact at the start of D and E as well, you might want to use the word adversely there as well, because there could be some situations where a change would improve things. in a positive way, have a positive impact. So we're looking at the adverse impacts that would be of greatest concern.
Okay, I just want to remind folks too, is when you're reading A through E, start at where the number 2 is, because you'll see where it says the amendment should not significantly impact the community in the following ways. So honestly, we probably need to take out impact from E, so we don't have impact in the sentence twice. So just
Yeah,
want
or
to
you
remind
could,
folks of that.
or you could just put the word adversely right up there, significantly adversely impact.
There we go.
And maybe that would simplify the whole thing, and you don't have to use the same words over and over again.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me, Hal.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Elizabeth, and then Sandy.
Our favorite subject, 2C. I like all the discussion we've been having on that, but I'm just curious as to why drainage was removed.
Sure. So drainage was removed because it's not a public service. It's more infrastructure. So it's
Okay.
under B. That
And
was why.
so that would be covered by their development plan?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, and then Sandy.
So my question was about number 3 and number 5. So number 3 says it's talking about long-term financial benefits and costs to the town, infrastructure, etc. And number 5 says non-residential amendments that will contribute positively to the long-term economic stability. So are they saying the same thing? Are we thinking that long-term financial benefits is the same as long-term economic stability?
So and correct me if I'm wrong, folks, is I think what 3 was getting at was that the development won't negatively impact costs of the town. Like you're not adding, and it is more likely with residential. You're not adding a lot of people without having like showing your impact fees and how services like police, parks, other things are being negatively impacted, where 5 is trying to tie that the amendment will produce maybe more sales tax or will positively help the town's financial situation.
Okay,
But
so
5 was existing and 3 was added. So if you think they conflict or are too similar, we can definitely look at the wording again to make sure.
I guess I would say that 2 things. The first is that number 3, you might take out the long-term financial benefits if you just wanted about costs. And number 2, I agree with Cheryl. I think that number 5 should just say all amendments.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, then Rosa, I think your hand is back up.
Yeah, so my little tech writing career is gonna rear its ugly head. So when you have a colon, what's in front of the colon is equal to what's on the other side of the colon. You have to stretch those little dots out and make them equal signs. So I agree with you, Malini, because the top sentence says demonstrate the benefits, and then when we get down to 3, we're saying benefits again. So you don't have to repeat on either side, like the one side should equal the other. So yeah, you might need to wordsmith that a little so that when you read flow top to bottom, your introductory sentence then just lists the items. Then the other thing is I too was looking at 2C, and I prefer active voice than passive. I think the first suggestion was results in reduction. That's passive. I would keep it active because you have everything else as an active voice. And then, okay, I'll take that hat off now. And now I'll just say, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that we can't nail this thing down to, I think you're in the right direction. You can't nail it too far down because even though it's an amendment and it's an ask, it's still a process. And there are some legal things that, you know, the applicant has a right to be able to prove or explore or whatever. So there's, yeah, I agree that we have to be mindful of that, you know, that it has to be in keeping with the legal process. So I guess Buyer would weigh in on that. Like you can't unnecessarily, you can't nail it down to the point where, like, using an example, like a traumatic example that we may have experienced here in Oro Valley, and try to see how you could put in the plan something that would make that less likely. I still think that, you know, what's in there is what the law requires. Like, they have to go to the community, you know, and they have to prove certain things. So that's my input.
Thank you, Rosa. Other comments on the amendment criteria? And Michael, I think we lost you earlier, so I apologize if you got cut off. Please feel free to raise your hand again.
Yeah, if there was anything, I don't know where I got cut off, but if there was a question on what comment I did get in, just let me know and I can finish the thought.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so head shake or thumbs up. Do you think this is heading in the right direction? We will work on the wording to make sure the sentences flow as one, and then look at 3 and 5 to make sure they're not. Oh, sorry, Dawn. Oh.
I was just raising my hand to agree with you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so looks like I got head shake, so I'm going to move us on. All right, so our next area, so on April 3rd, we did talk about a central gathering area. So just as a reminder, over half the community did want to have a central gathering space, and we also heard that a lot of events and online, there just is a want for more things to do, places to take friends and family to just hang out. And so we asked your group of what factors would go into that. You guys talked about shopping and dining, having entertainment, shade and amenities for outdoor experiences, making sure it's walkable with enough parking, mixed use, which then brought up a location of Oro Valley Marketplace. And then we did talk about Performing Arts Center as part of this. And as many of you noted, that it doesn't exactly have to be with that gathering space, but so putting it could be or could not be. So we're focusing now. Let's start with just A because it is pretty long. So we have goal 1, policy A, and then action A1 through A3. Give again everyone a moment to look through it, and then please raise your hand when you're ready to comment if there's something missing, areas where you need where we should have clarification, or if you just have any questions. And Dawn, I don't know if your hand is still raised from earlier, but
Yes.
okay. Cheryl?
I had a question on A1, the first bullet, connecting Steam Pump Ranch, Rooney Ranch, etc. I understand the concept of making a hub, making an area, but I'm not sure what the word connecting means there. Like, does that mean we want to have like walking paths from one to another? Because I'm not quite sure how that would work.
So I think it could be a couple of things. It could be physical connections, but it also could just be connecting it as aesthetically. So for instance, you know when you're entering those community spaces through either signage or design, you know, consistent design, things of that nature. And buyer, please add on if I'm missing anything. So it doesn't exactly always mean like exactly a physical connection. It could just be the way the look of it.
Melanie, I'd also add marketing too.
Yeah.
That, hey, this is the central, place to be in Oro Valley for shopping and entertainment. This is kind of our district, if you would, for lack of a better word. So.
Okay.
Okay, and Colleen?
Thank you. I just have a question. I know that we've got a hotel apartment, oh my gosh, car wash. What else is in the plan for the marketplace?
Sure. So Colleen, just so you're aware, you are echoing on our end, so I'm not sure if it's because if you're on two devices, you might echo. But in response to your question, there are hotels, apartments. There is kind of a space in the middle for people to like grass area, some amenities, and then also there will be the apartments, as you mentioned, and a car wash. There's also space for some more restaurants too. And Cheryl, just in response to your question, we will add more details to be clearer about connecting, so it's clear for everyone. All right, other comments or questions about goal 1, policy A, or actions A1 through A3? Cheryl.
Just another question. It's actually under the RWG guidance. I think when we talked about looking into partnership with schools, I don't remember the word amphitheater. I was thinking that we were talking about potentially an opportunity for using their sports fields and maybe potentially their auditoriums.
Okay, and actually I think, so I am going to move us down then to the second goal, policy, and action about performing arts. And Tom, I think you may have made this comment actually about working with schools, so I apologize if I summarized you incorrectly.
No, you didn't. I actually brought up the Catalina Foothills High School auditorium as being an example of a extraordinary public performing arts place, venue, if you will, that's used a lot, not just by people in the vicinity, but by the whole city. And that was clearly a partnership with that particular school district. And it would be nice if we had something similar here in Oro Valley. So that was the idea behind it.
Thank you. Okay. So now we've moved on to goal 2, policy A, and then policy or action, excuse me, A1. This is about the Performing Arts Center. And I do want to mention that we did talk to two other resident working groups also looked at a performing arts center and gave feedback as well. And with that, they did specify, which I think you guys also did, of it should be more than just performing arts. It should be more of an arts, cultural, humanities center. And then working with a nonprofit to try to achieve this in Oro Valley. Okay, it looks like most people are done reading. Oh, Sue?
Yes. What was the percent of people who wanted a performing arts center? Was there a...
Yeah, so from the survey, it was 58%. It was tied into the central gathering area. But I will say we did hear also online and at events of wanting performing arts space. And when we talked about it with the other groups, they also were in favor of it, aligning with what we heard.
Did the feasibility for the financial part to build this, or was that ever brought up?
It was by this group. So this is where we would be more assisting a nonprofit and maybe discussing funding options with them versus the town going out and paying for all of it.
Okay, so it's not just like a group of 5 people who are really wanting to do this, because I just have never heard of anything. I mean, you know, people they want roads, they want parks, they would love breakfast places, but I just don't know how we're going to pay for this performing arts thing. I mean, you know, if you asked me on a survey, would I like a performing arts thing? I would say sure. But if they said, would I prefer parks, roads, a breakfast place better? I would say, yeah. What I'm afraid is we're just kind of all going on to this performing arts because there might be 5, you know, people who are really wanting it in the community. And I just had to say this, that I hope we're just not all being pleasant and just going along with this performing arts thing, because I've lived in communities that had a lot more people than this, and they had a whole lot of hard time keeping that thing going. And it would have been really great if they would have put that money into a park with trees for us to sit under. And I just don't know why we keep going on this thing. And you know, like I said, I don't know if it was the way it was phrased, like, would I want to perform that? Sure. Would I want trees more? Yeah. I mean, I just think we better put on our thinking hats on this one before we get into something that we can't or we shouldn't afford. And I just, you know, this is probably my only comment that I'm very concerned about. The rest of it seems to be fine, but this, we better be careful that it's not just a group of very energetic group that just want this, and maybe they haven't thought about the financial or the feasibility of it. So, okay.
Yeah, so I just want to, though, focus everybody on that first bullet. In no way, shape, or form is the town paying for this. So we may discuss options, and we can work on the wording if you think discussing funding opportunities with a nonprofit isn't strong enough, but the intent here is not for the town to pay for this. It's to help a nonprofit who they are self-funding, doing their own fundraising, getting their own scholarships. So an example of this, and I don't know 100% of all the fundraising, but the Veterans Memorial at Naranjo Park, they created a nonprofit to do a lot of fundraising to get that art piece in. So that's our intent with the way that this action is written, is to not have the town pay for it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, you know, before we put funds in that, I mean, I'm just looking 10 years away. We have the best roads. And if you go down to Tucson, their roads, you know, they're very bad. And we just have to look at what we think are really the most important things and what we can get elsewhere for not having to put our money in. I just, that's very important to me. And I think the people I represent, I mean, that would be overwhelming. Yeah. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Sue, yeah, we're not looking to fund any of it. So
yeah,
no town funding. Yeah, and that is from we hear you that this group did bring that up. So we wanted to make sure that that's clear.
Okay.
Colleen, then Dawn.
Okay, I turned off my other thing, so hopefully it's a little better.
Perfect.
I like the way it's written, where we assist a nonprofit. Now, I've been involved in the performing arts from the age of 9 to 60, and I think it can be a plus, but I like the fact that it should be multi-use. The only thing people have talked about is the Gaslight Theater, but whatever would be, just from my experience, it would need to have some backstage places and some wings so that people can actually do things. But I love the helping a nonprofit. I've been on 4 nonprofit boards, performing arts boards, and I think this would help please those people who do want a performing arts center.
Thank you, Colleen. And then Don? And Don, you're muted. You're... Oh, and you're still muted. We can see you now, though. There you go.
Oh, okay. Where did that thing come from? I just, I have heard 2 or 3 comments being made in the discussions since we've started that I have the experience of all 3 general plans, and I'm starting to get some of the same feelings that we had in some of the other 2. And just remind everybody that this is a general plan. It's supposed to be general. It's supposed to be not, if it's not in one of the things I used to use on Planning and Zoning Commission, this is not the etched in stone plan. So this is not saying we are going to have a performing arts center. It's not, nothing in here says that we're going to pay for a performing arts center. It's just to, as somebody said, there is a general feeling out there that a performing arts center might be nice, and we should look at it as it would be a nice thing to have in our future. So let's not get too tied up on specificity. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Okay. Cheryl.
I just wanted to say regarding the second or the first bullet under there, discussing funding opportunities, et cetera. I don't know how you would do this, but it's almost like we would need to have some sort of a limit on it, because we don't want to have a person who's going to dedicate, a day or 2 a week to helping a nonprofit deal with their questions on how to do something. So it just a caution.
Yeah, and that might be too, though, where because we also, to your point, Cheryl, have on the 4th bullet of having staff help with guiding through, especially the permitting process. But I think the amount of time spent may be just too detailed for the general plan, but maybe we can look at wording to try to capture something to that effect.
Right. And they may be able to put a package together, an informational package that would suffice. And if they had some questions, they could certainly consult, but they don't have to spend as much time on it going over every single thing.
Yeah. And I will say part of it is, the nonprofit, they would be the lead. So any feasibility, market, all that, finding out where to put it, how to fund it, that would be all on them. We're just, as Dawn said, showing that, hey, this is something the community's interested in, so get it in there. Okay, other comments on this one before we move on? And we can clarify that the nonprofit's the lead. So it's very clear of who's doing what, and to your point about time and funding, Sue. Okay, so are the first set of goals, policies, and actions headed in the right direction? Thumbs up, head nod. Okay. Don? Oh, thumbs up, got it. Okay. All right, so then next we talked about mixed use. You guys helped define mixed use, what that meant. Talked about, we talked a lot about process in this one too, about how important the neighborhood meeting process is. Also, part of that neighborhood meeting process is always making sure that those surrounding the area are involved. looking at, and this is Michael, where you kind of mentioned earlier, is where do those mixed use developments belong? Now and this is also stemming, last time when we looked at the land use map and we talked about Mercado del Rio, we decided, or you decided as a group, it was okay not to make that land use map change at this moment. So this is a way, though, to show that that might be a good area for mixed use, Oracle and Pushview Lane. Again, if any of these areas wanted to become mixed use, they would still have to go through the development review process. And if they needed a rezoning or a general plan amendment, they would still have to go through that as well. So let's start with goal 3, working policy A, and then let's just start with the actions A1 through A4. So this is more of our mixed use group. And again, I want to remind folks you're also welcome to use the chat if that works better for you. How?
So going to A4, and you've got some examples of the kinds of places we might have mixed-use development, major intersections. The one that I wonder about is First and Oracle. I'm not sure that works. I mean, that's pretty well developed now. I'm not sure there's a lot of opportunity for further development, especially of a mixed-use nature. Another one, though, that you might want to consider, one near where I live, is the intersection of Oracle and El Conquistador, where I think there are some opportunities. So you might want to look at that as an example of an area where you might want to do some level of mixed-use development.
Thank you, Hal. And just to clarify, Oracle and First, we're thinking of the extending the San Dorado Plaza into what is now the town-owned Rooney Ranch parcel, and then there's still some private parcels in that area too. Was well, that area is so.
Well, you've got Oracle and Pushview Lane, so that would be the area I would be thinking about if that's what you're considering.
Yeah, we'll have to be clear on that because that was for Mercado del Rio. So I could understand the confusion with both of those. So we'll have to be clear. Yeah.
Might be helpful to clarify that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. All right, I am going to move us down. We could always come back up, but it looks like most people are done reading. So let's go to the Bs. So we also talked about parking standards, especially with mixed use, making sure that there's sufficient parking for all the uses, but the space, it's shared parking. Also minimizing asphalt coverage in view. Making sure that any new business or new redevelop, or these comments were specifically about redevelopment, excuse me, more than mixed use. So making sure that redevelopment is consistent and cohesive. We did also talk about noise and odors as new things come in. And then it was also brought up about signs, making sure they're appropriate in scale and compatible to the area. So we're on policy B and then actions B1 through B3. Colleen?
Is there a plan to bring in transit here?
So we did talk a little bit about public transportation in a previous meeting, and I think we did talk about microtransit, which is like the dial-a-ride, and seeing opportunities to expand that, but then studying opportunities to have your bigger kind of bus system or your larger bus system. And working to see if there's specific commuter routes that would be feasible and cost effective for Oro Valley.
Yeah, because I've only seen the express buses with the parking area up in the top of Rancho Vistoso. So I was just wondering it. I sometimes worry about us promoting high density because without transit per se, it does make it a little difficult to make that work. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Elizabeth?
Just wondering if this is an area where lighting should be mentioned, or if that's going to be covered by development plans and doesn't need to be included in the B area.
I think that's a good add. Definitely we can add that. It is, we do review lighting with every development plan, but it doesn't hurt, especially as we're talking about noise and odors and everything.
That's what I was thinking. Thank you.
And then Rosa?
That was my comment.
Oh, how funny.
I saw that and I thought lighting, because that's been something that people have been complaining about a lot lately. So that was it. The rest looks good.
Okay. And then Buyer had a comment. What does the group think about adding support appropriate mixed use development on major intersections to A4? Because I think even how I mentioned all those areas are a bit different. So being on Oracle versus First and Tangerine. Seeing a lot of head nods. Okay. Get that on here. And then Elizabeth.
I think you should put add lighting to B1. It's probably B2 where it says noise and odors.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. All right, not seeing any other hands. These set headed in the right direction. We'll make those changes, of course. Okay. Gonna move us on. So we then talked about, and this some of this came from your homework you did for the in-person meeting. Some of this definitely came from the discussion on April 3rd, but we did talk about being smart about growth, maintaining the suburban feel. Again, that went and when we asked folks about how do we have balanced growth, what we heard from you was we should have housing, employment, and mixed use. You need everything to support the community. We also talked about architecture and making sure, again, that everything's compatible, and that everything looks like Oro Valley and fits Oro Valley. And then lastly, we talked about building heights. And I'm gonna back us up just a little bit. We did talk about building heights. I do want to mention A3 for those of you who were in the housing conversations. A3 we talked about with housing group, but we did make some edits to it based on your feedback. Specifically, what we heard during those conversations was we need to be very clear about what roads we were talking about when we said on major roads, and also what separated from single family meant. So those were some of the clarifications. So before though, let me just, apologies, scroll up a little bit. I don't know if everybody can see everything. So let's start with C, just to be safe with everybody's view. So these ones are about that balanced growth. So we're on working goal 3, policy CD, and then C1, CD1. And again here, if Michael, you're still on the call, this is also where we try to specify the priorities we heard about development in Oro Valley. Don?
Yeah, my screen still has the mixed use zoning and redevelopment stuff on it.
Okay. Does everybody else see the ones we're on? Okay, so Don, you may need to use if you look in your lower right hand, you have a navigation menu. If you click on the little blue hand, you can move your screen over. Also, Don, if you want all the goals, policies, and actions that are linked in the chat, they were also emailed out, so you can definitely open up that attachment and just go to the page that's blue,
Yeah, okay.
if that helps. Okay, Rosa?
So I have a question, under the D one, I guess it is. What do we mean by updating the zoning code?
So specifically, even for mixed use, we may need to update the zoning code to allow more mixed use, or at least not allow more, but to have specific requirements for mixed use. Also, what was brought up was the want for townhomes, condos, those
Okay,
like
I gue-
higher
Yeah, I guess
density
it wasn't
low-rise.
clear what we were updating it for, like facilitate the development of a greater variety, and then we're like, update the zoning code. So you're meaning updating the zoning code in support of that?
Yes, right. So I
Okay,
don't know
all
the
right.
specifics of what we would have to update, but if we need to make sure that those types of uses are
Okay,
built here, we may need to update the code.
because I guess where I get thrown off is multifamily, single-family housing types, mixed use, and employment. And that the employment, I think, is tripping me up, because all those are housing types. And then maybe employment would be like identifying a suitable location for employment. Yeah, but when you're talking about updating zoning codes, that really doesn't apply to employment? So I guess that's what was confusing me.
Yeah, and it may. So a couple years ago, I'm gonna say 5 years ago now, we did update the uses for like tech park to
Oh,
get
okay,
more
yeah,
of
so
those
commercial.
smaller
Okay,
players in.
right,
So
so, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so employment
it could
type
require zoning code update.
buildings or something. I guess it's just the word employment by itself doesn't connote, you mean like
okay.
commercial or tech park or whatever. But yeah, that was the only thing that tripped me up. But I think I understand what you're saying. You updating it relative to being able to provide that variety.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe, yeah, employment, we can look at that wording to see if it's more of a use based than what you're providing.
Yeah, like employment facilities or something or whatever, just so that it's like a use and not a, like when I think of employment, I don't think of zoning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
No, appreciate the discussion. And then Sandy added maybe it's just as necessary to updating the zoning code. And then Colleen?
How tall is 3 stories?
It's typically about 36 feet.
So it would be similar to what was approved for OVCN. Because I think that was restricted to 36 feet. The church.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And it can range anyone from like 25 to 36 feet, I would say. Okay, I'm not seeing hands up, so I'm going to move us down. So again, the next set of comments were about compatibility in terms of design. So making sure that everything blends and fits with the Aurora Valley. We also wanted, you guys, excuse me, also wanted to make sure that the views were protected. And I will also mention that we met with another group who also talked about views. And so with regard, and then also with regards to views, again, A3 was brought up in the housing conversations, but we thought it was still applicable to this conversation as well about views, but we did make some edits. So all the new language is in all caps to help. And appreciate the opportunity to have you guys look at A3 again, because we definitely want to make sure we get it right. How?
Yeah, I'm looking at the first bullet point under A3, in proximity to Oracle or Tangerine with access to shops, services, employment areas, and transportation options. I guess the question in my mind is, what kind of access are we talking about? Just by way of driving? Would it be access by using a bicycle or walking? No, I think it should be the latter. I don't think people should have to get in their car to do those things. So you might want to clarify what kind of access we're talking about here.
And maybe here's a question for the group. So I recall that it was more that the taller apartments need to be near shops, services, and things. So maybe that's even a better word than with access to. Maybe it's along Oracle and Tangerine and near all those things.
Well, I think proximity is important, but you also have to have a way to get there besides just getting in your car. There's got to be some kind of pedestrian way of getting there, and it should be easy to do. It should be people should feel safe and want to walk instead of getting in their car. Which I think in a lot of places, the shop may be just around the corner, but you can't get there very easily by walking. So we want to make sure that happens.
Oh, that makes sense. And that, so we'll leave with access, but clarify it. And I think that also supports this group's discussion that they're most appropriate when they're supporting that nearby commercial area. Colleen?
I know that the Starbucks, well, I think I know that the Starbucks that's proposed by the hospital has altered access to Tangerine. Is that access for the whole Tangerine all the way into Marana? That was one of the big issues for us early, a year and a half ago, was that the bulk of the access to the proposed construction was through Woodburn. And our neighborhood, the Reflections neighborhood, said no, it needs to be elsewhere. So is now Tangerine more available for construction, for egress and ingress?
I will have to maybe defer to Buyer on that. I don't know the specifics of that PAD amendment.
So the answer is yes. So ever since the town took over Tangerine Road from the state was very much in line with prohibiting any additional access to Tangerine. And the town has been and probably will continue to be more flexible about that. For example, the new access from the Vistosa Safeway to Tangerine. Previously, ADOT wouldn't allow that to happen. That's why it took so long. Once the town took over ownership, we were able to say yes. But the landowner's gotten the message loud and clear from that case that you need to go back to the drawing board on access. And Tangerine's an important option.
Thank you, Buyer. So I'm not seeing other hands up, and it looks like most people are done reading. So are these ones headed in the right direction? Does everybody feel that A3 hopefully is headed even more in the right direction? Okay. Seeing thumbs up, head nods. Okay, so the last couple areas we talked about on April 3rd were about EV charging stations. And just so we're all on the same page, this is private property owners having electric vehicle charging stations. And so under there, you guys talked about no subsidies, but again, this would be private, not the town doing it. But making sure that they can be in commercial areas, single family homes was discussed a lot, especially in garages. And then there was some concern about HOA common areas just because of the ongoing maintenance for an HOA. And then also we talked about utilities. That was a multiple choice question that you guys answered. And so what we heard was overall, the criteria we have now for utilities was good, but making sure to also add in impact to residential areas as a part of that criteria. So we can look at all of these together. So we're on goal 5, 6, and then all the policies and actions under the green and red boxes. So again, I'll give everyone a moment to take a look at this. Cheryl?
When ABC won the final bullet there, no, actually, I'm sorry, it's A2. I know they're being installed at gas stations. Is that anything we may want to consider putting in there as well? I mean, we don't have the traffic off of 10, but nevertheless, if somebody is staying at a hotel and they don't happen to have one, is that something that they might do while they're shopping at Safeway?
Well, there you go. What does the group think? Is gas stations a good ad? Yep, seeing head nods. Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. Elizabeth?
I like that ad, although it's probably already covered in commercial centers,
That's true.
but I like the ad specifying it.
Yeah. Don? Don, you're muted again. There you go.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Question. Charging stations are one of those things that's kind of new to everybody. What's going to stop some if we require commercial to put in charging stations? What's going to stop somebody from going to the Safeway parking or lot at 9 o'clock at night, parking their car there, plugging it in, and heading home for the evening in their girlfriend's car or their wife's car, et cetera, and therefore, the commercial ends up having to pay for the recharging of vehicles. I just, we can't be a mother to everyone and everything that comes down the line here. You're putting a cost on commercial that I'm going to have to end up paying for, but I don't have an electric vehicle. So I would be opposed to any any charging station type things being required on commercial lots, except possibly hotels.
Okay, and so the way it's written, we wouldn't require it, it just enables it. So, right now it's not written that they would have to do it, is the way I'm reading it. It would just enable them to do it.
Enable leads to require. Just
Sure, and I just want to remind folks, so we did hear from over half the community that they support more electric vehicle charging stations because they are going to continue in popularity.
if I had an electric vehicle, I would want to have them too because I don't have to pay for it. Of course, the community is going to say that. It's how about if we say we're going to put free gas at Safeway? Yeah, I'll go there.
All right. We could work on the word enable, but I know the intent, and I think even from this group wasn't to require that they be there. It's just to make sure the code has something in. Right now, there isn't anything in the code for it, so it would be in there. And then Randy clarified that. Oh, that even if it's on a commercial property, the electric vehicle, the owner of the electric vehicle is the one that actually pays to use it. And I have heard that from other groups too. It's not free. They have to pay to charge their cars. So if that helps. Rosa?
Yeah, I mean, just if you just reword it a little bit and just to allow it to be an option on private property, because I think there are places, my neighbor was telling me, because he has an electric car and he actually drives across the country. And he says there's actually places restaurants that do allow you to charge like at a discount or some of them free because they want the business.
Mhm.
They want people to stop there off the highway. So I think, just allowing it is and providing the code so that it can be put in. I mean, I think I definitely would keep that in. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think my next car my husband has informed me, will be electric, but I know a lot of people that already have them and they are like acclimated to where to get to stop and, and how to do the whole electric car thing. So I think, yeah, it's an incentive for some businesses to get people to stop and stay because it's like 40 minutes or something. So it's enough time for you to get a meal. And so that's the incentive.
Got it. Thank you. Want to thank you and Randy, and then even Buyer added some clarification as to how they're used. So it sounds like um, even the commercial center uses a third party to get them, and they'll relay that cost to the customer. But Don, do hear your concern, so we can try to work on the word enable so it's clear that it's not required. Okay, other comments on these ones? Okay, are we all headed in the right direction? Good to move to the next area? Okay. So the last thing is I want to check in with this group on the draft guiding principle. So what we heard from residents is on our left side. This was from the statistically projectable survey, but I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that a lot of what we heard at the survey was supported at those events as well as online. And especially when you see the colon, a lot of the language after the colons is from the event and online comments. The draft guiding principle is on our right-hand side, so I'll give everyone a moment to read through. And so just want to make sure, do you think that the guiding principle accurately captures what residents said? Or are there changes that need to be made? Rosa?
So the only word that stuck out for me is limited. I like thoughtful and something maybe a little less limiting. Like environment with thoughtful and careful development. I don't know. Limited sounds limited. And some people might balk at that and say, well, if it's limited, then we're never going to get more restaurants, that kind of stuff. Because everybody always wants more restaurants. So I would just maybe work on that word, but the rest of it looks good.
We're gonna go, I think Colleen, you were next, and then Dawn, I think you're after Colleen.
I'm always beating a dead horse. Having gone on the public art tour and seeing all of the empty storefronts and business fronts, I wish there was some way that we could put in there that we want to, well, you kind of do with attract and attract and retain more restaurants and retail. But it really does bother me that there's so much empty space and we're talking about building when we already have a lot of supply and what feels like not enough demand.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Colleen. I will let you know, we do have another guiding principle just about business attraction and retention. And there is a guiding principle in that one about filling empty storefronts. So
I appreciate that.
So we're trying to cover all the bases.
Okay, so I don't need to keep driving around to see what's open and get cranky about it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm personally really eager to get you guys what we're calling a 30% draft so you can see each other's work and all the guiding principles come together because I think that's when you'll see that too. Cheryl, then, or sorry, I think Dawn, were you next? Yeah, Dawn, and then Cheryl.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep, you're good now.
Okay. I'm going to apologize in advance because this comment is going to take a little bit of time to present to you. I'm looking at this thing in front of me that says limit height to no more than 3 stories and to protect views. Last December, during a council meeting, Vice Mayor Barrett raised or proposed a motion to put in as a guiding principle that 4- and 5-story buildings are inappropriate in Oro Valley. And she cited as the reason for that the surveys, the phone survey, the in-person surveys, the other things that we had done. And she said that there was obvious consensus, if you will, and it was actually her exact words were quoted in the Explorer. So if I'm getting something that's a little bit off, you can go back there and check it. But and I'm paraphrasing all of this, that 87% of the 8,000 to 9,000 respondents that they had, she said that 87% said that that 4- and 5-story buildings in Oro Valley were inappropriate. When I saw that, I didn't hear it, I wasn't there at that meeting. When I saw that, I thought 87% of 8,000 to 9,000 is just a huge percentage of the people that responded. So I started hunting through the data, and I must say it wasn't an exhaustive hunt, but I went into some pretty deep stuff to try to find that percentage, and I never could. In fact, I never found a question that would result in that that number being out there. So I wrote a letter to Ask Oro Valley, and I asked would they please provide me with the source of that. And by the way, it was put before the council, and the council voted for it unanimously, and that's why it's sitting here on my screen right now. And the response I got was, if you want some information from Vice Mayor Barrett, ask her yourself. So I said, okay, fine, I can do that. And I sent an email to her and said, what was your source for that? And I didn't get any response. Ask again, and I finally got a response that, and the response basically was, I was relying on memory, and I was incorrect. The percentage wasn't 87, it was 86. And I thought that's interesting. But to make a long story a little bit shorter, there is absolutely no support for her comment that 87% of the people didn't want 3 or 4 story or 4 or 5 story buildings. That question was never asked in any of the previous surveys. It was never asked in the Path Forward surveys, etc. And I've come to the conclusion, sadly, that she made that up.
Oh.
And
Not here, so maybe, yeah.
Pardon me?
Well, she's not here this evening, but maybe if you want to, if you have a.
And so I would like to see this limit height to no more than 3 or 4 stories taken out as a guiding principle, because first of all, it's a very bad principle to put that kind of an anchor around the neck of a community, and etc. You cannot build a 1 or 2 story or 3 story hotel anymore and have it pencil out with a good return on investment because of the cost of land and the cost of construction in this community. It's just not there. So basically what you're saying in here is that, and there's not a lot of places in Oro Valley where you could put a higher building than that. Obviously La Posada is a 5-story building, but you can't see it from the vast majority of Oro Valley. But this is just not simply not a good idea to limit ad infinitum this kind of a thing. It is really basically puts a great limit on commercial income in this town. So my request and or advice is that this be removed as a guiding principle. And I'd be happy to discuss this with anybody.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And so just want to remind folks to keep it respectful. It doesn't matter who, we're not going to focus on who did what, but let's focus on the terminology in here. So, but one thing just for the group to think about is in a guiding principle, the 3 stories is pretty specific. And I just want to ask, and we'll, as your group is thinking through this, is do keep in mind, you do have that specificity in your actions. So you have restrict apartments over 3 stories, and you have the limiting the 2 to 3 story apartments. And the comments, or what we did ask folks, is about 4 to 5 story apartments. So it wasn't all buildings. And I remember from this group, what we heard was there is maybe opportunity for taller buildings like Splendidos and things like that if they aren't doing views. So I'm just throwing that out there as part of your thought process. If you think your actions and policies have enough specificity that you if you want to remove it here. Just keep that in mind, you have that, but up to the group. Not removing the whole thing, but just the limit height, doing limit height to protect views and removing the no more than 3 stories in the guiding principle. We had Cheryl, then Sue, and then Rosa.
Back to the bullet that said limited development. I noticed that comes across from the resident direction, which said 68% are concerned about managing growth and balance. And I know we talk about that in the next little bullet down, but there's no arrow. So, I don't know that limited is a good word, but maybe is something that talks about, sensible growth or something like that in terms of development.
Okay, yep. And then Sue, and then Rosa.
Yes, I think I agree with you on that. That limited is vague, but I know why they put that in. So I agree with Cheryl on that. You might just get away with just putting thoughtful.
I'm seeing Cheryl and Rosa shake their heads.
Anyway, and then also back to this 4 to 5 story rental apartments. Well, I'm definitely going to disagree with Dawn on that, because somebody brought up one of these meetings, what they said that, I don't know who it was, but somebody said that they only want to see the tops of mountains. I don't know what that was about, but I talked to my neighbors a lot about this, and they all want to see the whole mountain. So I really do think in Oro Valley, we need to think of Oro Valley as a community, and it isn't really a high-rise community. So I can see why whoever made a survey that this would come out. The 4 to 5 probably, unless it's in a deep hole, it won't fit in our community.
Okay, thank you, Sue. And let me just ask everyone, because what I've heard throughout all the meetings is when we're talking about height, it's been focused on apartments and high rises. So the way the guiding principle though now is every building. So just to clarify with the group, do you want the height restriction focused on apartments like you did in your action, or is it every building in Oro Valley should be restricted to under 3 stories?
If I can just jump in here, I do think the question about 4 and 5 story apartments, that only 14% of the people, I think the actual number that responded to, are you opposed to, or do you think 4 and 5 story apartments are inappropriate? And the response was 14%, which is a very small number. And it's kind of a misleading question, because was the 14% against apartments, or was the 14% against 4 and 5 story buildings? That was a question that I remember saying. Now, which one are they really talking about here? Thank you.
Thank you. And we don't know the answer to that, because the question was just stated as 4 to 5 story rental apartments. And then Randy added to the chat of perhaps it should specify that the height limit is for apartments or residential. Commercial building heights should not impact the mountain views, and consider topography. And as a reminder, there are 2 assisted living centers that exceed the level currently. We're going to go to Tony, because we haven't heard from you yet, and then Rosa.
I agree with Don that 14% is negligible. But people want to protect the view. So could we rewrite this that say height qualifications will, I don't quite know how to do it. That height qualifications be related to views of the mountains, or, because I think as farther away and as we grow, we would want that 4 or 5 would not be a problem. Height qualification, height limits be related to qualifications of the views, or
And I think
I
in
just
the,
need help with the words on
Yeah.
this. I know what people are saying. They don't want to cut out views of the mountains. But, you know, I live on Meadow Sage Drive, if anybody even knows where that is. I don't see the whole mountain from the front of my house. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not from the from Oracle level up.
yeah. So I
It's the
think we could,
wording.
yeah, thank you, Tony. So I think we could just put limit height to protect views. And actually that came from Hal. Thank you, Hal. Limit height to protect views in the guiding principle, because you guys did specify that it needs to be no lower, anything taller has to be lower. You're restricting apartments to nothing over 3, and any that are 2 to 3 need to be far away from residential and on major roads. So that
We're
is,
not saying that 2 or 3 need to be away from major roads.
no, they're on major roads away from single family. Thank you. Yeah, to clarify. So that could be a way to still have the views are important, but just to remove the no more than 3 stories, because you specify that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is too much specificity, as the lawyers would say.
Thank you. Rosa?
So I'm going to disagree with Don. I don't think that 14% represents all of the people who, if you ask them, if you could poll everybody in Oro Valley, I don't think you get a large majority of people saying, yeah, let's have at it with 4 and 5 story buildings. I think that in the comments, I saw some good things like in select locations, and, you know, the hospital being one of the exceptions, but the other side of the street, and I attended every neighborhood meeting on Marketplace, there was a majority of people against the height of that building. Now, you would have to be deaf not to have heard those comments. The people didn't want it. And that is a scenic corridor. And I know I've heard all of the excuses about the depression in the land off of Tangerine, but the setbacks were slim, and it was denied. And it was the decision that was made with an enormous amount of community support. So if you wouldn't put it there where there's a depression, you know, I don't see this as being something that would float very easily by many of the citizens if you had a neighborhood meeting. So keeping that in mind, what we have in the other areas, limiting the apartments, I would think that after what we just went through with OVCN, you know, height of building is everything in this town. And people get very upset about buildings exceeding the height that is in the zoning code and about exceptions. And so I would be really careful not to stress with the, I guess, the spirit of what people's sentiments are towards height, and that is to protect the kind of feel of Oro Valley where things don't protrude up all over the place and things blend into the landscape. And I'll finish with this one comment. I heard a lot of comments about La Posada online and in various scenarios, and I had not really understood what people were talking about until a few days ago when I drove past, and it wasn't blocking my view of a mountain. It was just what I saw to the left as I was, you know, headed up First Avenue. And it is a pretty intrusive structure. I mean, it gets your eye. It really, really gets your eye. And it doesn't look like it belongs. So I think because so much of Oro Valley has respected the heights, that I like the comment that said, you know, only in select locations. So I wouldn't remove that residents do not think that 4 and 5 story rental apartments, and I would be in favor of expanding it to 4 and 5 story buildings is acceptable in Oro Valley, just because of just lived experiences. I attend every neighborhood meeting I can and listen to what people say. And the overwhelming response from people who have to deal with this or who live adjacent or near is negative. They don't want the tall buildings. So I think that we're on the right track by limiting it.
Okay, thank you. And Colleen also agrees. Let's go to Elizabeth. We haven't heard your thoughts on this one yet. And then Tony, I'm not sure if your hand is still up or not, but.
I just wanted to comment on the 14% may seem low, but last year I talked to probably thousands of Oro Valley residents when I was campaigning. And the subject that came up the absolute most, even more than golf, plus or minus, whether they liked it or not, was building heights. And no more than 3 stories, 4 and 5 story buildings were unacceptable to most of the residents that I talked to. So I just wanted to throw that out there so y'all would understand that that may have been a small percentage in the survey, but it really matters to people in Oro Valley. And that's what I heard last year.
Yep. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that context. Tony, and then again.
I know that no, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
I know there's a hotel has been approved for Marketplace. I don't know how tall that is, how tall that hotel is going to be.
I do think it might be Buyer. Do you know? I'm not sure. It's 3 stories.
I just want, if anybody knows.
Oh, it's 3 stories.
3 stories. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, then Dawn and then Sandy. And Dawn, you're muted. Oh, Dawn, you'll need to unmute.
I hear the comments that when you ask people, do you want 4 and 5 story, I understand that. But let me give you just a couple of examples of the Marketplace. From the intersection of Tangerine and Oracle, if you're at that stoplight there, you are 100 feet higher than ground level at Walmart. So you can't see the Marketplace from that intersection, but if you could, you would be looking down on the roof of a 5-story building. It would not impact your view whatsoever. The same is true at the intersection of First and Tangerine. You're 100 feet higher than the ground level where the hotel would have been built. A 5-story, if it was 5 stories, you're 100 feet higher. So I would be very happy with some in selective locations. I think a 5-story building is appropriate and does not block anybody's views. And I agree that the architecture of La Posada is not the best in the world. But I'll tell you, you cannot see that building from 90% of Oro Valley. But if you ask somebody, gee, what do you think of the 5-story building off Posada? Oh, we don't want 5-story buildings. It's a gut reaction. I understand it, etc. But there are specific places, not many. I would never put a 5-story building, on some place like the Safeway property. You could never get away with that. But there are places where it is and would be appropriate. and to say that there will be nothing more than 3-story buildings in Oro Valley. What happens when we go up to the area to the north of us in Arroyo Grande? There's some pretty deep valleys and hills, etc., up there that could never be developed with this thing if we put something in the code that says, and I recognize too, this is a general plan. It basically has no legal restriction to it whatsoever. It is a general thing and it's a plan. But I think this sends a message that I don't think we want to the development community. That we just, you know, and to call a 3-story building or a 4-story building a skyscraper, I think probably is a little bit of an exaggeration.
Thank you.
You.
Don, so I've heard from a couple people now about the select areas. So what if we add some of the wording about the limiting height? Sorry, I was reading in the chat. So maybe it is, we can look at that one to make sure we're still capturing the 3 stories for apartments, and then limiting height for non-residential, maybe to protect view in select areas or something of that nature. And Buyer, if I didn't summarize your chat very well, please
Yeah,
speak.
and actually, thanks for asking. Actually, my chat, I I left out the word not. So go with Hal's wording and not include a story cap in the guiding principle, but keep the cap in apartments and talk about commercial sites that it is the rare bird site where you would ever consider going over 3-story, but you're not totally locking it down in a blanket way. But emphasizing it's a rare site. It's one that where it's been demonstrated not to block folks' views, et cetera, et cetera. But it has to be demonstrated.
Yes, it's the strictness of the wording that bothers me. I understand the height thing.
Yeah.
But when you basically say that we're going to have an Oro Valley for ad infinitum, or you're going to suggest that ad infinitum, that we not have anything more than 3-story buildings, I think is really a bad idea.
Yeah, and I think we can reword that really carefully. Limit height to more than 3 stories to protect views. Semicolon, I love semicolons in grad school. Select areas may be appropriate for taller buildings.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, we could definitely work on the wording. I guess, and I'm just going to ask folks to please raise your hand and wait to be called on, just so we're not talking over each other. Sue, we're going to go to you, and then I'm going to try to get some consensus on this one. Try my best.
Okay, so 82% of residents have prioritized 82. You never get 82% on just about anything ever. But here you have it. 82% of residents prioritize protecting views of the mountains. And I think we need to listen to our constituents.
Yep. Thank you. So saw a lot of head nods when Buyer was talking, so I'm just gonna ask if everyone, again, remember, you're accepting this. We may not all agree with it's 100%, but you find it's acceptable and is good for the community, of stating it in a manner of limiting height to protect views, as Hal suggested. And then we'll make sure on that action where you guys already talked about where locations where heights should be okay, making sure it's clear that that's also for commercial properties as well. So does changing it to remove the number, so it's just limiting height to protect views, and you're getting that specificity in your goals, policies, and actions, where we do restrict apartments over 3 stories. Seeing people are noodling, thinking about it. Robin?
Okay, this isn't part of it, but I guess when I think of like, we start allowing higher heights, then if it was to be like, I understand, I think Rosa commented about how La Posada like just looks huge. And so I worry about allowing higher heights and then how much volume of multiple buildings that are built in that area. And then that idea of how that impacts everything else that we just talked about in the last hour and a half about the impact on us and on our community. Because the higher up we go, let's just do an apartment for the moment, is volume. And then if you go across with multiple buildings, now you've increased more volume. I don't really know what the answer is. I just wanted to share that.
So I'm wondering also, we could put in the guiding principle something about compatibility to the area. So it's not just to protect views, but make sure it's compatible, which may help with some of that, what you've brought up, and that could also get to the select areas too. Let's go, let's see, Sandy, then Tony, then Dawn.
I just wanted to mention that views, while we mention views of the mountains a lot, there are other views as well. And a perfect example of that is driving up first and looking over at La Posada and how that ruins that view. So it's not just about the mountains. So I think we need to keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Tony, and then Dawn.
Okay, I don't think we need the word apartments in there anywhere.
Oh, sorry, that was already, I meant it's already in the action. Not to add
Okay.
here, it's in the action. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then Dawn, Dawn.
I would just like to see it worded in a more positive way, general, that something on the order of buildings higher than 3 stories will be allowed only in areas where it doesn't, that they can be more than 3 stories, but there will be, restrictions on where they can be. I just want to put it in a more positive way.
Okay. Other thoughts on this one? So maybe just to get some guidance for staff as we try to look at this last bullet point. Do you all feel that it's okay to remove the number 3 out of it, but trying to make sure that the height's still limited, views are protected, and compatibility is included in some, we don't have to wordsmith it now, but is included? Is it okay with this group to remove the 3 stories from this because it's addressed in the actions? What are your thoughts on that?
That would be acceptable to me.
Me too.
All right, maybe Rosa?
I guess once we get the whole document and we see how it reads, I mean, this is not the final edit. So if we take it out and then it becomes, a situation of ambiguity, we can always put it back in. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Like we're just in a draft form, right? So if it flows with the goals and policies and actions, and it flows to this, and then it's not, it just kind of says the same thing, then I think we'll be okay. And I think it'll get voted on and people will feel secure. And that's really how I look at it. So I think it's okay. I think we've beat the dead horse.
Yeah, and you're right, it's still a draft. I definitely want you all to speak up so we have direction of what to do when we're trying to revise the language. So I don't want to I want to make sure that this group is accepting removing the 3 stories, and we'll reword it to try to figure out to hit all your points. But let's go to Hal, then Cheryl.
Yeah, I just threw out another idea. It says limit building height and bulk to protect views and assure neighborhood compatibility. So it adds in this notion of making sure the scale of the building is appropriate for the setting, basically.
Okay, thank you, Hal. And then Cheryl?
I don't mind the 3-story being there. The question was specifically asked whether it was clear or not. It was specific to what, do residents don't think 4- and 5-story rental apartments are acceptable in Oro Valley? So I think you might have people that are not interested in voting for a plan that says 4- and 5-story are acceptable. Judging by some of the stuff that I've seen online as well and heard from friends regarding La Posada. So just my thoughts.
Yep. So maybe, oh, Hal, sorry.
Well, just one more thought here is we are talking about principles, which are the highest level of a policy statement, and you really don't want to get into a lot of detail in a principle statement. So that's one reason I'm uncomfortable with specifying a certain building height, like certain number of stories.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time. So is everybody, would everybody accept that, kind of like what Rosa said, we'll work on the wording to try to make it a little more, we'll take it up a level just because it is a guiding principle, but you'll be able to read it with all the actions, goals, and then of course, if we're still missing that specificity to make sure we are meeting residents' values, like you've all pointed out, which is views and compatibility, then we could always, we'll continue to refine and work with it. Is that an acceptable path forward?
Okay with me.
For now, we can we'll take another stab at it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But and then send it back out to you all. All right. So with a couple minutes left.
Linda, you mind if I ask a clarifying question? So my understanding is, so we're taking it up a level and not being specific in the, as I understand it, in the blue area in front of us. But in the actions, we are being specific so that apartments aren't over three stories. And then there's language about commercial that says stay under 3 stories unless there's a rare circumstance where views aren't blocked. Not those words, but that meaning. Is that what we're talking about?
You do thumbs up.
Because we want to get this right. And if I'm off, please tell me. I just want to make sure that, we have some direction to go try to take a stab at it. So
I think you're on the right track, Mr. Villa.
See, I did see most thumbs up. And then, yeah, Elizabeth, Rob, yeah, we also do want to add bulk and compatibility. So make sure that gets in there. Okay. Well, I appreciate that was a really good discussion, and I really do appreciate the direction. So we can make sure we're making changes that represents your group in this discussion. And as Rosa said, it's still very much a draft, so we'll continue to, to work on it. So I do want to just sincerely thank you all, not just for tonight, but for all the meetings. A lot of you have attended all these meetings since February. That is a lot of work. Your group had a lot of big topics to talk about, and you also had the most meetings of all the groups. And I know many of you not only attended this group, but you attended other groups as well. So hats off to you. Really appreciate your commitment to the process. This will be your last meeting. And so what will happen next though is the end of this month, so not next week, but probably the following week, we'll be sending out the 30% draft. And what that will be is it reconciles all 4 groups' work into a cohesive document. So all the goals, policies, and actions. So for instance, many of you, you saw a lot of duplicates. As we were going through this process, you won't be seeing that anymore. So it will read more, it will flow better. But it also gives you opportunities to see everyone's work and making sure that everything has been captured. We will be asking you to submit comments on that, and that's a great opportunity to do the wordsmithing and send us your wording changes as well on that 30% draft. From there, we'll be taking all of your comments on the 30% and we'll continue to revise and refine. And then at the end of the summer, we will be reaching out to meet again. Not the same amount of meetings we had this time, but some meetings just to look at the 60% draft. The difference between a 30 and a 60 is a 60 is your complete plan. So all the maps, the introduction sections, everything. It's a complete and formatted plan. So we'll have all the design that you would want to see, that you will be seeing with the plan. We'll also be trying to achieve consensus on that. Once a consensus is achieved, it will be promoted and published to the broader public for feedback. So we will, so everyone in the community has an opportunity to read it. And with that, I just want to thank you. It is a little over 7:30. My apologies. I got long-winded at the end. So thank you all and have a good night.